I wanted to just go over some basic things. I'm not going to go over too much like the like how to. I'm going to more show you what is possible with this program and how to basically go about creating some things. So I'm not going to show you like explain everything of the UI or anything like that. So for right now, I'm just going to, I open up the program. I'm doing it standalone because when you open it as a plugin, it has a tendency to be buggy, sometimes crash. When you open it by itself, it's a lot more stable. Maybe it's just my computer or Logic, but I went to the file menu and I did a new ensemble. Ensemble is a collection of instruments and yes, Tony.
Do you have zooming turned on? Could you zoom in once in a while?
Oh yeah, sure, I'll do that. Thanks.
But yeah, there you go.
So when you first see this, there's different views or whatever. I'm going to be using this split panel view. Up top is like the GUI, your interface, which looks like like basically if there's a hardware synth, it would look like the hardware synth. Whereas down here is where all the patching and everything is done. So the instrument is essentially a hardware device, to put it simple, like a hardware synth in layman's terms. And then this is the ensemble view where you can basically hook up multiple instruments together. I'm just going to focus on one instrument at a time. So I'm going into instrument, and the simplest thing I can do is right click, go to built-in module, and just create an oscillator. So I'm going to create a, there's a lot of different types. I like saw waves, so I'm going to create a sawtooth. And there we go, there's our oscillator. Just like with PD, there's wires, you can output, drag the output to these things. These are right here, these little brackets. Let me zoom in on this. These things have these little bracket symbols on them. Hey John. So we just started, I just created a new ensemble, and I'll show you what I did, just to recap. I just right clicked anywhere on here, went to built-in module, went to oscillator, and you can pick anything. I just picked a sawtooth, and then, okay.
How did you get to the ensemble view?
You just double click anywhere on the field. So this is, I don't have the newest version of Reaktor. In the newest one, there's more of a tree view, which is more better explanation of where you are exactly. But right now, I'm viewing the ensemble because you can see the master inputs and master outputs, stereo. Input doesn't matter because I'm not going to have any signal coming in. I'm generating the signal. But if I double click on this, or if I just, if I double click on this, it goes into the instrument. So again, I had created my sawtooth wave by right-clicking, built-in modules, oscillator, then picking sawtooth. And I'm just connecting these to these. These little brackets right here are actually, they're, let me zoom in more. These are digital audio converters, digital to analog converters. So if you see these things, that's all they're doing. They're just D to A converters. So essentially, all I need to do to start getting sound now is, and let me turn this down just in case, is I have two controls over here, and with pretty much anything, you can click on it and see the help over here. It's going to show you this, P is the pitch and A is the amplitude. So I'm going to, easiest thing to do is right click, create control. So right click on the little input, and then create control, right click, create control. And there you go, I have sound. Now if I go up here, it's going to stack everything on top of each other. It's really annoying, but you click the wrench icon. I think there's a hotkey too, and just drag it over, then turn off edit mode, and there you go. Simple as that.
Edit mode, same shortcut as PD?
I'm not sure what the edit mode. Oh, I think it's Control P. Yeah, Control P is the option, but it might be different depending on which version of Reaktor you're using. So I'm going to turn this off because that's annoying. Okay, so we have a constant tone, but that's not what we want. We want, first of all, let's get MIDI input on this because I have this MIDI controller here. We should be able to use some MIDI. So all I need to do for MIDI is, let me get rid of these controls. I'm just going to drag and delete them. Right click, built-in module, MIDI in, note pitch, and I'm going to obviously drag that over, connect it to the pitch. Built-in module, MIDI in, on velocity, because if anyone who knows about MIDI knows that usually the on is triggered with a velocity, and then to stop it you trigger it with a velocity of 0, so that's that. But now we encounter a kind of a problem here, because the problem is they never turn off because there's no envelope on the notes. They just turn on and they just stay on. So the other essential aspect we need is an envelope. And by the way, the way I'm turning this on and off is this big power button in the top right corner. So let me just create an envelope. And essentially, once you see how this is structured, sorry, yes?
I'm just curious why when it receives a 0 velocity, they don't turn off.
Oh, because it's not
It's not reading the velocity yet.
There's no off velocity.
There's no off velocity. He couldn't set a value of 0.
Yeah, so essentially we need an envelope. The two essential things to anything is oscillator and an envelope. So I'm going to create this envelope. I'm just going to create a standard ADSR. Now, essentially the envelope wraps around the signal, so, whoops, sorry about that. I'm going to zoom in here and delete these wires, and right-click, built-in module, math, and just do a multiply here, and drag these, this one here, and this one here, and the output goes to here. So the sawtooth, or the oscillator, is multiplying against the envelope, and the output is going to the DAC. You can arrange it slightly differently if you want to. I find this to be most simplest. So okay, I'm going to create controls for the ADSR. I'm just going to right click on the inputs, create control, right click, create control, and so forth. And if you can look and see, it's automatically naming them all, but unfortunately it's stacking them all on top of each other, so I'm just going to have to go over here and kind of separate them a little bit. Okay, so
Is that something that's like a known thing that they're gonna try to fix someday, or?
I have no, I really don't know. It's irritating, but I've learned to deal with it. So anyway, the last thing you need to do is put a gate on the input for the envelope. That's what this G is for. So since we're working with MIDI, you right-click, built-in module, MIDI in, gate. That's it. And then you just connect it here. And there's a little light here on most of these things that shows if it's properly connected or if it's disconnected. So that's kind of helpful to know. And then this little, yeah.
Just a quick question. Does the wiring order matter like with PD?
No, it's not like PD. It's a little more straightforward. In fact, most things don't have, the things that do have input usually have an input for each thing they want something put in. Like you won't connect multiple things to the same input most cases, and they're usually labeled. So it's kind of hard to get things messed up because it's everything's a lot more defined than PD. PD's really abstract about things, whereas this, they're like, everything's like a pre-built envelope, a pre-built sawtooth oscillator. So it's easier to get the basic stuff done because you don't have to build everything from scratch. So now that I have this here, let me make sure my attack and all this stuff is set to some acceptable values. I think that's fine. So if I hit a note, let's see, hold on. Let me make sure this is on. Turn it on. Okay, so that's on now. We have sound. So this is the basic layout you'll see to create any typical essential synthesizer, and then everything is kind of like a modulation of this format. So I'm going to jump into show you, I'm going to save this real quick just and show you something I've made And okay. So this is something I've made in a previous class, and it might look a little bit more complicated, but all these things right here are just controls, and as you can see, there's our familiar envelope and oscillator. This one has a frequency control on it. The FM one is same thing as the regular oscillator, but has a frequency control you can use instead of the pitch, so you don't have to do any conversion or anything like that. So the only thing that's really different about this one is I have this extra envelope here. In this thing you don't even have to worry about. All I'm doing is I have a control here that's inverting it, so if you want it to be the opposite. Otherwise it's just doing a multiplication and feeding it into the frequency, so it's going to be modulating, this envelope is modulating the frequency. It's just basically going straight down into here, into this frequency port. If you zoom in right here, this is all just going into this frequency thing. So when I play a sound, you're going to hear the frequency modulated or affected by the envelope. Okay, so one thing that's cool about what?
Do it again.
Okay.
Change the shape of the envelope.
These I have. Depending on how much control you want over the envelope, when you go to built-in module and LFO and envelopes, there's a lot of different kinds. So really, it depends on how much control you want over it. But I'm just doing simple, and I have all my controls up here. If you can take a look, the ones highlighted in red are the ones that are affecting the pitch. I could have named them something differently, but you get the idea. So those ones are all controlling the pitch. And one thing that's really cool about Reaktor is it has these things called snapshots. And essentially a snapshot is what you would consider to be like a preset for a synthesizer. As Brad said, it also captures real-time data, so I guess technically if you're playing a note, it can capture that event, but I'm not exactly sure. So I have these different things, and basically it's all working off the same structure, but they're different settings of the attack, decay, sustain, release. So if I click a different snapshot, let me make sure this is... Hold on a second, I have it looks like the bottom of my screen is getting cut off and I need to see something down here.
Press the green button.
Yeah, see, it's cutting off my buttons down here.
Drag up from the bottom right.
Okay. It won't let me get to it. It doesn't matter, there's a few buttons down here that lets you add that would let you add things like a pen store or whatever, different snapshots. So this one goes up, and then I have this one, which is crazy because it has a really long attack on it, on the frequency change. I call up the motorcycle. So there's a lot of crazy stuff you can do, and you can, whenever you find something you like, you can save it as a snapshot. One thing that's awesome about Reaktor is you can randomize the controls. And this might be a little bit different depending on the GUI and the version, but expand this area down here where it says snapshot, morphing, and random, and just click randomize just whenever. And what it essentially does is screws with your controls randomly to let you find some unique sound out of this configuration of modules you made. So I'm going to show you something different now.
Hey Caleb,
Yes.
is the snapshots only match the controls? They don't have anything to do with the objects?
Yeah, that's correct. The objects all stay the same. It's all the same. Essentially, if you let me zoom in on here. If you look, this is essentially all the snapshots doing. If you can.
Drugs.
Yeah.
That's the name.
It was this one.
That's what I feel like.
So essentially all this is doing is just presets of the controls here. And for each instrument you can have their own snapshots. This right here is a master fader for just the controls, and this has its own snapshots. If you click on the name of the instrument, you get its own snapshots. So now I'm going to load up the next thing. And I'm going to try to go quick because we only have about like 23 more minutes. But when you go over synthesis, I'm sure most of you know about the different types of synthesis. There's additive, subtractive. Additive synthesis is really useful for percussion sounds because essentially you're taking these sine waves and you've got a fundamental and then you have these different partials you're adding up together, and they have different envelopes on them so that you create a more percussive sound. So these are some of the sounds I was able to create. And this might look complicated right here, but essentially all these things right here are just controls, and then all these things in the middle are identical. They're all just this. That's all it is, a sine wave and an envelope and a little bit of math. And they're just macros, and they're identical macros. They're all the same thing, and they're just adding together and adding up and then being converted. So it's really just a bunch of envelopes and sine waves, sine oscillators.
So when you say a macro and you double click on one of those fundamentals, you're going inside of it and seeing the internal structure of it?
Yes, that's correct. You can create, it's kind of like if you've done PD, they have the, okay, I don't actually remember the name of them off the top of my head.
Abstract.
But yeah, abstractions. But if you right click, you do macro and you just do new, you can do one in, one out. It doesn't matter how many outputs you create or inputs, because if you're inside, you can create new terminals for imports or outports. So if you pick the wrong one, you can just create them yourself. And then you just double click. It's basically like Inception with modules. Okay, so if I play these sounds, I get, all right, I created this from scratch. And there are tables online that show, like, if you add up these partials, you can get these certain sounds. So, play that real quick. I got a chime here. I created this one just last night. It's got a neat kind of xylophone sound. And I created that just by randomizing it and then fine-tuning it to get the sound I wanted. So if I just click randomize a few times, I might be like, hey, that's cool, but there's like, I don't like that. One of them has a too long of a decay, so maybe it's this guy, so I'm going to take this decay down. And then maybe there's too high of a frequency in it. Well, this is the highest frequency right over here. This is 28.35 times the partial, times the fundamental, so I'm going to bring that down. Oh, that's nicer. So a lot of the work becomes just randomize and then tweak it to get the right sound you want. And that's what I find is the best way of creating sounds. So,
is there any way to randomize only one parameter?
Yes. Each control, I'm going to click on, let me zoom in here. So let me say I clicked on this one right here. And I go over to here to this checkbox thing, and again it's different based on which version of Reaktor, but there's a checkbox down here called Morph Random Isolate, or Morph Rind Isolate. What this does is it prevents it from being randomized. So if there's a certain thing you don't want randomized, you can check it. Unfortunately, there's not like a basically solo random. I guess the best way to randomize is just a single control, just play with it. But if there's stuff you don't want randomized, or if you're like trying to hone down on, like, okay, I like this, but these things need changing, you can pick things and you can do morph random isolate. Then when you go over here and hit randomize, if you look at the oscillator 1, notice it's not moving. Everything else is changing, but that oscillator 1 is not moving at all because It's just isolated. Now, if you notice it says a morph random isolate, that's because there's a thing called a morph control here. If you pick this thing, you can pick one of these. You can click over on this side, pick one of these, and essentially what happens is that's one.
Oh, it's so cool.
So basically you can morph in between these two different settings, and if you look over at the controls, they're changing in real time to catch up with your slider.
Can you assign a mini control to that slider?
Um,
That morphing slider?
I'm not sure. There are a lot of modules you can download on the Native Instruments site, like macros that people have made. One thing is a snapshot selector, where there's actually a control on here that changes the snapshot. I think it's called Snap Switcher. And so you can actually use MIDI to change the snapshot in real time. But I'm not sure about the morphing. I think there is, though. I think there is some way in here. That's something you'll have to find out on your own, but I believe there can be a way to do that. Now I'm just going to zoom out, and I want to move on to the next thing because I want to make sure we have plenty of
Quick
time.
question.
Yeah.
Would you theoretically be able to take an LFO, a random LFO, and then assign it to, like, each time you hit a key, each time you hit a gate, it sends a new number, a new random number?
Probably.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, you can pretty much do anything. That's the great thing about this is it's not as complicated as Brad made it seem. It's not quite the same as PD because PD makes you do pretty much everything from scratch except for a basic oscillator. Like making an envelope is a tiring procedure. Whereas in here you just create an envelope and there is got inputs, it's outputs, it's simple. So if I want to put you said an LFO, right?
You don't have to do it. It's just
Okay, well I'm going to show you some of the more complicated stuff as we go on. Let's see here.
it seems logical that you should be able to do.
Well, I'll show you this. I was going to save this for a bonus, but I'm going to go ahead and open up anyways. This one is, I made a sequencer in Reaktor, and these, basically the way it works is I have these knobs, and each one of these knobs is a number of semitones up from the original pitch. So, and then snapshots do different scales. So this one's a dominant 7 up, and this one's the Ionian scale. This one's Aeolian or minor scale. You know, so
To my least favorite, Phrygian.
Phrygian. Okay, so basically the way this one works is this stuff over here looks familiar, right? It's got an oscillator and an envelope, nothing fancy over here. All this is doing is taking the note pitch and adding something to it from this stuff over here and putting it in here. And essentially what it's adding is, all I have is the sequencer control, which is a built-in control. You go to right-click, built-in module, sequencer, and then how many steps you want. And that pops it up right here. You right-click on each of these, make a control. You can see the controls I have over here. And then all you need to do is create a clock oscillator to feed into this thing right here. So you just right-click, let's see, built-in module, oscillator, clock oscillator. And that's where you would create this. And essentially, you know, I just have the number 1 going to the amplitude. There are some things in Reaktor you need to know about is certain modules won't work unless you have certain inputs hooked up to it. A lot of that is one of those things that usually occurs is the amplitude. So all you have to do is, like, it's working. If I delete this, now it's not working. Just right click it, create constant. Hey, it already put a 1 there. It works now. So if you notice right over here, this right here, ST gate, I can't remember exactly what that was. I think that was a MIDI in single trigger gate. I believe that's so that, oh yeah, that's so it will restart If I don't have this single trigger gate, it'll go. It won't restart over each note. So I right click built-in module, MIDI in, single trigger gate. That makes it restart on each different note. That makes the sequence restart. But one thing that here is this controller is changing the frequency of the clock. So I have this mapped to my mod wheel. If you can right click in built-in module, MIDI input, and you can use the controller, or you can just put a knob if you want it to, and then with any knob you can do a right click and do MIDI learn, or you can go over to the properties right here and let's see, info connect. You go over to connect and it's got MIDI options, controller number, soft takeover. You can do pretty much anything with any control, with any knob, any slider. Yeah.
Can you sync it to the external program?
I believe you can. I don't have a lot of experience with that, but there's a lot of inputs in here for syncing in some places. Like this clock right here has a sync control. If I click right here and go to synchronization, yeah, it's SNC. So there's possibly synchronization, but I'm not an expert at that, so that's something you may have to find out on your own. But as I was showing you, this controller is mapped to here. So if I change my mod wheel, there we go, different speeds. All right, I'm gonna jump over to the next thing. I still have a lot to cover. Subtractive synthesis is a really neat one. It doesn't take a lot, and you can create some pretty interesting sounds. Let's see, where to go. This probably looks more complicated than it needs to be. I have a tendency to add a bunch of stuff. But actually, this is two different instruments in one, technically. Let's just focus on... let's see. Okay, so basically I try to combine two instruments into one, and essentially let's just focus on one at a time. So LPF4. So there's two different ways, simple ways of doing a subtractive synthesis, and one is by taking a envelope in just a decay envelope and putting it on the frequency of a 4-pole filter, or whatever filter you want to, and then having some noise come in, and just putting a normal envelope on it to get it sound kind of like this. Hold on a second. Let me see. This is all set up. Let me see if I undo that. Oh, that's why. Just ignore this up here. Basically, I have two different methods of doing it, mapped to this crossfade, but essentially all I'm working with down here is this stuff right here. So if I randomize, if I go to some of these snapshots, let me turn this up a little bit. I don't know why this is so quiet. Maybe my master's down.
You have a gain control there, John. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know why it's like that. Hold on, let me change this. For any knob, you can go into this view right here and change the max and min values. So I'm going to change this max value to 1. I'm not sure why it was at -0.1 or at 0.1, but okay. So now we can actually kind of hear something. What's that?
You want a dynamic range.
Yeah, I know. So I'm going to basically show you, I'm going to just show you some of these sounds right now. There's two ways you can do it. This one I believe is called a patch style, and this one might be called a noise style, but I'm not sure. Don't take my word for it. I could be completely off. But it creates pretty interesting sounds.
So you got a pulse on the top one.
Well, let me turn this down now. I think that's why that gain control was there.
Names are awesome.
Yeah.
He's a little guy.
Well,
Cool. I like that a lot.
I think you're peaking pretty hard though.
Yeah, I'm. I'd have to fine tune the amplitude controls.
Could you throw a limiter on there? Just
Probably. Right-click built-in module. Let's see. Audio modifier. Slew limiter. I don't know if that's it.
Clipper probably makes it better.
I'm not sure, but there are a lot of really neat built-in stuff you can play with. Unfortunately, I don't really have time to go into the details of this, and it's more of a synthesis thing. But essentially, if you break it down, you know, this is just an envelope on the end. We've seen that before. And this is just a filter on a noise oscillator, or a noise generator, if you want to call it that. That's being fed in, it's being filtered, and it's being modulated by a envelope here. You see, so most of these are all controls. It's nothing special. I just, you know, right click on controls, and it's really just 1, 2, 3, 4 things, and they're all built in. You just gotta wire them right, and you can get the right sounds. This one's a different one. This one's an impulse response that's going into there. It's got a different, again, it's got an envelope going into the frequency, so there's an envelope modulating the frequency. And, you know, this is just a note pitch on velocity. I got some multiplication there to increase the frequency into the right range. And it's not too complicated. Most of the stuff is controls and pre-built stuff. You just got to make sure it's wired up correctly, and you can get a lot of different sounds out of here. As I mentioned, this one's a crossfade, so I'm really just taking 2 different instruments, and I have a crossfader on them so that I can get 2 different types of subtractive sounds. You guys can come in.
Oh, they're in my class.
Okay, they can come in if they want. So really, again, I have the randomized control, and
Fuck you guys. We're just doing a presentation.
hold
It's really cool.
on. Something's going on wrong.
You never say that. In a presentation.
Hold on, let me just reopen this. Let me just reopen this real quick. And
Gain control.
You can edit that out.
Max value.
It's my class.
Just edit it out.
Yeah. They can handle it. 4 minutes of this.
okay, something must be going on with the randomized. It's not working right now, but that's okay. I'm gonna move on to the next thing because I'm running out of time. So
Show us your best thing.
okay.
Why?
There's a lot of different ways to do modulation on things. Check this out. Does this sound familiar? Anybody?
Still like a phone.
Yeah, that's it. And I came up with that completely by accident too.
Accident.
And all it's doing is this. It's just all it is taking an oscillator and mapping the oscillator to the amplitude of a sine wave. So it's just. Wait, whoops. All it is, it's amplitude modulation. So that's how you can make something. Let me go to the next thing. Well, okay. This one is, all I'm doing here is literally the same thing, except I'm modulating the frequency instead of the amplitude. You guys can all sit down. I mean, if
On the floor.
there's enough chairs. Here, you can move that one back if you want to. Sorry about this.
You still have 3 minutes.
Okay.
One thing I would like to know is
Yes.
can you modify external audio with synthesis?
Yes, you can.
It's peaking right there. That's his voice.
This is input.
Oh yeah, it's inputting because I have a mic
So-
in here.
So that L and R on the left is your input from
Yes.
whatever source you want.
Yeah, but you
That's
can also do a sampler in here. So you can make a
Okay.
sampler, and then you can basically feed it in with there's a thing called a map editor, and you can load in samples and work with that.
I can plug my guitar into my
Yes.
computer and
Yes.
just run
You
it
can
through.
use it as an effect box.
I
Yes.
love this program.
Okay, I'm gonna have to jump.
Crazy.
That's all I
I'll
can love right now.
I only have a few minutes left, so I'm just gonna show you the coolest stuff because I'm running out of time to explain things. So this one is a cluster. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was literally just putting sine waves or sine oscillators, modulating things and controls, LFOs and stuff. So essentially I just got Oh, one thing you want to notice about this is I put on a fusion reflections. Now, Reaktor comes with a ton of pre-made stuff, and let me get rid of this thing real quick. What you can do is, how do I get this thing off? Okay, there we go. You can, for anything, if you want to basically add reverb on something, you just go to this view, right-click, insert instruments. You can do effects. Fusion reflections is one I had in here. And then if you look at the display right here, the ensemble view, this is my custom instrument right here. And I put this fusion reflection on afterwards. This is my reverb.
Can you
So,
edit that?
yeah, I believe so. Hold on. There we go. You can go into it. You can change anything you want to. You can basically screw around with it all you want to. So this one has a long delay echo. If I change it to reverb, it has its own presets, its own snapshot. Suddenly it becomes different. There's also a lot of cool pre-made Reaktor instruments, like, for example, laser bass.
Where did this UI come from?
They made it. It's basically their own instrument, and you can make. There's another really cool one called Steam Pipe 2. This one's awesome. It creates really. You can use the mod wheel to change the breathiness. There's a lot of different. It even has like. Let me go to snapshot view. It has a lot of guitar sounds. Oh, that's not that great. Let me go to like pipe organ. Pipe.
Wrap it up.
Yeah, I know. So, and then there's one more I wanted to show you real quick, and that is called subharmonic. And for some reason it's collapsed by default.
That's a lovely sound.
And this one right here. This one's really cool. Really slow attack.
My wallet is hurting
Yeah.
already.
Okay. Well, I'm out of time, but hopefully you can see just some of the power, like kind of ramp up. It all starts from just one oscillator, one envelope, and you can go from there, adding reverbs, all kinds of stuff. You can play around with built-in modules that are in Reaktor. You can play around with pre-made instruments, and you can all hook them up together into an ensemble. If you look right here, this is their ensemble, and you can change it to, stick in your own instrument into the pipeline. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Kip. By the way, I've never seen so many students show for an APEC meeting.
Yeah, I know.